Well, that happened. Well, I've got a good joke coming up for this one. Let me join over here so my little screen can know what we look like. Oh, that's not great.
Okay,
Okay.
are all back here now? Sorry about that. That was my fault. My phone just kind of popped up the Zoom, and then I turned it off on my phone, and it ended the conference. So I had to come on again.
That's fine. Everybody popped back on really quickly. So yeah, great. Attendee count's back where it was before. So everybody, it's fine. And I know exactly how this goes because the old line is that a bad dress rehearsal means a great opening night. So for this to be the very first thing that happens is absolutely perfect. Great, and Dr. Sunil just showed up, awesome. All right, so that was time anyway, and we'll get started. Thank you everyone, to all the attendees who came, and thank you to all of the panelists that are here. It's really an exciting lineup. I was just going through the bios, and it's just a great mix of people from all walks of life and all fields related to entheogens to support the launch of awake.net, which is the baby of Lakshmi. She will be the second speaker to explain more about it. But our first speaker will be Rick Doblin, and I have my thing here. And you know, Rick hardly needs an introduction. During the reign of Reagan, he was the one who decided to try and make MDMA an approved medicine and founded the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. So that's what I believe is referred to as chutzpah. But not as well known is that Rick actually studied with Dr. Stanislav Grof, and he was among the first to be certified as a holotropic breathwork practitioner. So he plans to eventually become a legally licensed psychedelic therapist himself. Rick lives in Boston with his wife, his dog, and empty rooms for the 3 children, one of whom is in college and 2 of which have graduated. And Rick's fun fact is that his one Ibogaine experience was one of the most important psychedelic experiences of his entire life. So thank you very, very much, Rick, and turn over to you.
Great, thank you, Les. And thank you, Lakshmi, for organizing this and everyone who's participating today. I really look forward to the whole day's events. One of the topics that I've been sort of assigned or going to be talking about is how do we know that it's a renaissance, that we are in the midst of a renaissance of psychedelic research. And one of the best ways that we know that is through the number of scientific publications about psychedelics. And I often have a slide, but I'll describe it. It's a slide of the publications over 70 years, starting in the 50s and then going to just a year or so ago. And this is the Web of Science publications. And what it shows is that there is virtually nothing in the 40s, and 50s just starts to beginning in the 50s. And then it comes to a big peak around the end of the 60s, the early 70s. And that's when the backlash happened against psychedelics and the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. And that's when the US shut down research with psychedelics. It was 1966, actually, that the NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, last funded psychedelic research. And so then there's like a drop for over several decades of the number of papers that are published about psychedelics in scientific journals. And these papers are almost entirely about the risks of psychedelics, what's wrong with them. And then we see a gradual increase around 1992. And that's where the FDA opened the door to psychedelic research again. And now we have about 5 times as many papers that are being published every year on psychedelics than were published at the height of sort of the 60s psychedelic experience that we had. And so that's just one example of the evidence for there being a major renaissance. The other is that in psychedelic research right now, MAPS is in phase 3 for MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD. We have actually one completed phase 3 study, and we're in the midst of the second phase 3 study. Compass and USONA are doing phase 2 studies with psilocybin. There's loads of other studies that have been happening with psilocybin and other psychedelics in patient populations. And so we are now, in terms of scientific research, further along than at any point in the 60s in terms of prescription use. Most of the studies that were done in the 60s were about academic research, some in patients, but now we're just incredible. And then the other thing that's really, for me, very significant is that we've now finally got MDMA research taking place inside the Veterans Administration. I started talking to the VA in 1990 about MAPS funding research inside the VA. And it was the therapists and psychiatrists that are really interested in doing the research all are very supportive and sympathetic because they see patients, vets that need more help than what's available, a lot of treatment resistant people. And it was always squashed by the political leadership. And I would try again every 5 years in a different VA, and it'd be the same old story. It would be the people closest to the patients would want to do stuff, and it would be stopped by the political people. And that has finally shifted. So October 12th of this year was the first MDMA administered to a veteran inside the VA. This was the Loma Linda VA. And Rachel Yehuda at the Bronx VA has been screening her patients, and she's about to give MDMA to a vet with PTSD as well. And quite a bunch more will follow from that. And we just submitted a protocol to the FDA, and this is going to be for group therapy for MDMA for PTSD in a group of vets. So we're way ahead of ever we were before, now getting MDMA research, and there will soon be psilocybin research also in the VA as well. Even in Texas, amazingly, funded by the Texas State Legislature. Another sign of the Renaissance is that there are now hundreds of for-profit psychedelic companies, which means that we've cleared out a lot of the regulatory obstacles. The public attitudes have changed. People can tell a story about how they might be able to move through the FDA or set up psychedelic clinics. And in the last 2 years, MAPS has raised roughly $50 million in donations. But the for-profit companies have raised over $1.5 billion. So that's a tremendous vote of confidence in the fact that there is this renaissance in psychedelic research. And a member of MAPS' staff has been keeping track, and there's about 400 for-profit psychedelic companies doing all sorts of different things. The other evidence of the Renaissance has to do with public attitudes and the media. So just in the last week or two, the Today Show did a tremendous story on MDMA for PTSD. CBS Sunday Morning News did another tremendous story on MDMA for PTSD. The New York Times just had a story about how veterans were incredibly effective advocates for psychedelic research. This was front page of the science section last Tuesday. And overall, there's just been such tremendous media, very positive, very promising over the last decade or so. So we're not filled with terror stories. If somebody takes psychedelics and has bad outcomes, it's the opposite. It's that so much hope and promise. And so that's what we're seeing a lot in the media. Another sign of psychedelic research is all of these psychedelic research centers that are being set up at universities, including at Harvard. So we can say we are now at the place where the ghost of Timothy Leary has been buried, for sure, where Harvard has set up a center for the study of the neuroscience of psychedelics. It's just a tremendous sign that that has really happened. And also one of the most stigmatized drugs, LSD, we managed to finally get LSD research started after around 30 years. And now at Hopkins, which is really well known for all of their work with psilocybin, they're going to be doing with Matt Johnson a study of LSD for pain. In the background, also a sign of the Renaissance, is this incredible drug policy reform that we're seeing all over the country. And part of that, of course, is medical marijuana leading to legalization of marijuana. But now we have Denver making mushrooms the lowest enforcement priority, and then Oakland, and then Ann Arbor, and Cambridge, and Somerville, and Detroit, and Seattle. It's moving on and on and on. And sort of one of the extremes of that is the Oregon Psilocybin Initiative, which is really setting up a state legal system for training guides, certifying guides, and providing therapy, not just to patients, but to people for personal growth and for spiritual purposes and other things. And the other big factor is the ketamine clinics. So because esketamine has been approved for treatment-resistant depression, and a lot of people therapists are providing generic ketamine, which is way cheaper and arguably even better than esketamine. There are now 700 to 800 ketamine clinics in the United States alone. And they're going to be the base for which we then build on for creating psychedelic clinics. So what are my concerns, though, about this renaissance? Well, one concern is that a lot of these for-profit companies are going to try to minimize therapy and try to make it as inexpensive as possible in a way that's good for scaling, but I worry that they might minimize therapy too much. What about training therapists? So we can minimize therapy, but when we start minimizing the treatment of therapists, the training of therapists, I mean, and in particular, it's important for therapists to try the drug that they give to their patients. I think that they are undertrained if they don't have direct experience in the drug that they want to give to patients. So how do we do that? We do have a protocol from the FDA to do that, but it's a scientific experiment, too expensive. It's hard to scale. We do have some isolated cases, but they're important, of sexual abuse of patients, and that's really bad. And we need to do whatever we can to try to prevent that from happening. And again, that gets back to the training of therapists. And I'm concerned about insurance coverage. Will we be able to get insurance coverage for this to really scale it? And that's also another reason why we need to do more and more drug policy reform, so people can have pure drugs, honest drug education, access to peer support, and treatment on demand when necessary. I think that'll help. And the thing that I'm not worried about is all of the potential bad outcomes from legalization or decrim, because I think we've done a great job of educating the people, and the media has, that the risks of research are much, much different than the risks in non-medical settings. And as the final thing, and I know I'm out of time, I'll just say that last year, 100,000 people died of overdoses in America. The year before that, it was 79,000. And yet we do not have Ibogaine research taking place in the United States. It's just barely beginning in England with Atai, and we have Ibogaine clinics. But we really need to focus a lot on how can we get Ibogaine. And I would just suggest as a last thing that Ibogaine is not a drug of abuse. Even though it's illegal, it would be the best example of combining our efforts to try to get Ibogaine completely descheduled and legally available in the United States. It is definitely not a drug of abuse, and it can be used to deal with this incredible overdose death problem that we have. So I'm very hopeful the way things are going, and I think this educational event today and others like it will really be helpful for us to bring this psychedelic renaissance fully to fruit, with eventually thousands and thousands of psychedelic clinics all throughout America. There, thank you. Brevity is not my strength, but I've tried.
You did great. Thanks, Rick. Thanks so much for sharing. All right. And now we will move to today's host. And Lakshmi is the founder of Awake.net, and she's been a designer for 40 years and a psychonaut for 20 years. And she came to the US in 1985 as a grad student in visual communications at the University of Illinois in Chicago. Then went on to work as a designer for major healthcare and other corporations like Schwinn, Encyclopedia Britannica, and won a bunch of national design awards along the way. But as an insider to healthcare marketing in that world, she became disenchanted with the system itself. And when she discovered entheogens in 1996, she became a fringe person, as she said, for many years. And she started to work to create with brands and websites of change makers in the nascent psychedelic arena, like MAPS, like the Women's Visionary Congress, the Synergetic Press, Crossroads Ibogaine, and organizations like that, while actively seeking to raise her own consciousness through any means or molecule. And since 2012, she is the founder of Awake Media, a coalition of independent contractors, and the executive director of the nonprofit Awake.net, which is the subject of today's launch. And her fun fact is that she's been a student of the I Ching since the age of 19 and knows almost the complete Wilhelm Baines edition I Ching by heart. And she actually has been teaching me about the I Ching since we met at Rick's conference years ago, and it's been very fruitful for me. I Ching would help anybody. Seriously, give it a try if you haven't. And so now today's host, Lakshmi, here I am.
Can you focus me? Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. So I want to connect some dots for you in 8 minutes if I can. And so I've got this chart behind me. So I think we've become numb to numbers, and here are the numbers. Since 1962, we've known that Ibogaine can cure or help addiction. We've known, and it hasn't been rescheduled or researched since 1962. If you look at how, like, about 200 people die a day of overdose. So if you divide that by 24 hours, somebody dies every 8 minutes. So I hope to inject you with the urgency that I myself feel about acting on this, because we've really become used to something being a certain way for such a long time. So the other dot I want to connect is profit, not profit. Now, Rick was talking about how the profitability and the research and the billions of dollars is a sign of the Renaissance. But the other aspect of it that nobody has really touched so far is the spiritual aspect of psychedelic medicines. And Awake.net is really where I hope to focus conversations about the psychospiritual experience in all its dimensions. And those of us who have taken psychedelics know how profound that factor is for healing, for awakening, for understanding our own consciousness, for evolution, for cognitive expansion, you might say. So that's something I hope to do at Awake. The other thing I want to point out to you is that psychospiritual healing itself, the church and the state have been divided for a long time, but when hospitals first started, they were started by churches as charitable organizations. And when they moved into the business sector and became profitable organizations, well, then suddenly your disease is more profitable to a healthcare system. Chronic diseases are more profitable than things that can be cured. And so this idea that there is no cure for things has now become common parlance. And I suggest that there is a cure. You can cure things. It's not, addiction doesn't have to be a chronic disease. It's very profitable as a chronic disease. And I don't mean that the people who are inside of these systems are bad, but the systems themselves, because they're for profit, they create this corruption in the behavior that they create. So the third dot I want to connect is the social dilemma. So if any of you have seen the movie, The Social Dilemma, it's a bunch of people who are big executives at Facebook and other companies who are talking about the evils of the social media. And some of them won't even let their kids use social media. And when I heard that, I kept thinking, well, why won't you let your kids use social media? Well, the reason is because if you're not getting the right information, if things are being suppressed or snoozed or advanced for advertising or lobbying purposes, then you don't have the dots to connect the big picture. And if huge populations don't have the dots to connect the big picture, it creates confusion. And we live in a really confused society right now. So I decided when I saw that movie, I thought, well, I want to create something where it's private, where it's ad-free, where people can actually commune and get together. And it's a social network that is a knowledge sharing platform. And that's what Awake.net is. It's a knowledge sharing platform for the entheogenic community. So So that takes me to FEAT and to the FEAT program itself. How many minutes do I have, Lex?
You have 4 minutes, but you're the host. You're the one person who gets leniency.
All right, so I can take a breath and relax here because I'm racing against time. So I took Ibogaine in 2015, and it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. And I've had a lot with entheogens. So when I came out of that experience, I said to myself, why doesn't the mainstream know about this? We should do something about it. I decided to make a movie, and I created a campaign for Iboga Saves, and with Eric Thierman from Impact Creative. And we filmed, we have 40 to 50 hours of footage that we took. And many of the people that I talked to would say, I would really love to do Ibogaine, but I can't afford it. So then I suddenly thought, well, what's the point of making a movie about Ibogaine if nobody can afford the treatment? And that's when I created FEAT, the Fund for Entheogenic Addiction Treatment. And I thought that we would raise money to send people to clinics in places where it's decriminalized or legal, because it's going to be years, it might be a decade before Ibogaine becomes legal and insurance covers it, and it's inside the system. So that's what FEAT is. It's a program where people can apply to get a FEAT grant, and we would provide a $10,000 grant that would take them to a clinic under the aegis of Dr. Jeffrey Campbell, and they would do an Ibogaine treatment. We want to do 100 Ibogaine treatments in 2022, and we want to record all of them, document them as videos, as well as get data from them and put it up on the website, and also create a protocol for how to do an Ibogaine treatment safely. So that's the FEAT program, and FEAT exists inside awake.net, which is it's a kind of a unique platform. It's a social network. It's a online co-working space. It's a crowdfunding platform and a blogging platform. And also, we want to bring together a group of mentors and masters from all over the world who are experienced with psychedelic therapy, with shamanism, with entheogenic treatments, with integration, with all the things you would need to be able to take huge numbers of people through Ibogaine treatment successfully. And that's the goal. We want to take people through these treatments. And it's not just Ibogaine, because really when you take Ibogaine, this is what I've heard from many people, if you do an Ibogaine treatment, what happens is that you have, not only have you had a reset, but you have established a connection with your psyche, with something inside of you. And when you do that, you want to go back into that experience. You want to experience that again. You want to grow, and it's a process. So we want to teach people how to relate to entheogens, how to use them, how to awaken the inner shaman, you could say, and how to integrate your experiences successfully. So I guess that's really what I'm offering. And at this point, we've bootstrapped awake.net and we've launched it. And I have a wonderful board of directors who joined me in this effort. But we can't do it without you. We can't do it without the entheogenic community getting behind us. But we can literally get behind this issue as a community and create a web presence on awake.net for the entire entheogenic community, so that people will come there and they can learn all about it. And my goal is to quicken a transformation in consciousness, because I think we really need it. That's where we are as a culture. That's where we are. So please donate, please join. And if you have any questions, reach out to me or to anybody on the board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. It's really an amazing project, and you can check out awake.net right now, and donations help, of course, but even just following along, there's a lot of different, they have a lot of different social media feeds that are getting up now, all the big ones. So just joining those would be a great way to start as well. And check it out just for all the information that's already there, blogs and books and things like that. There's a lot of great information already that's very helpful. So thank you very much for spearheading this. And now we will go to Dr. Eric Kimlin, or Dr. Jeffrey Kimlin. And Dr. Jeffrey Campbell is widely recognized as a world expert on cardiac safety in Ibogaine treatment, which is always a concern. You should, if you have a practitioner who's not using paddles, they're not a practitioner you should be working with. He's a fellow of the American Society of Addiction Medicine and has twice served as president of the Florida Society of Addiction Medicine. Very interestingly, in 1996, he was a key contributor in early clinical trials under Dr. Deborah Mash to assess Ibogaine's utility in the rapid detoxification from opiate and other drug dependencies, as well as reduction of post-acute withdrawal syndromes. He has served as the Global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance Chief Medical Advisor, as well as Editor-in-Chief on the Global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance Clinical Guidelines. Over the past 20 years, he has supervised or participated in nearly 2,000 clinical Ibogaine treatments and believes it's discovered to be one of the most important moments in the history of addiction medicine. Now here's Dr. Jeffrey Kimlin.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on such an esteemed panel. I'd like to tell you a little bit about who I am, how I got here, where things were, and where I hope they go in the future. So kind of like Albert Hofmann on Bicycle Day discovered LSD serendipitously and realized he had a profound mystical experience. My first LSD experience, I didn't know that I was dosed with LSD, and I had a profound mystical experience. And like many people who have their first psychedelic flood dose experience, the next morning they wake up and they say, oh my God, if everybody in the world would take this drug, this is the cure for world peace. It's some 30, 40 years later, and I've changed my opinion on that somewhat. Before I became an MD, while attending medical school, I lived with the Huichol Indians, a culture that was not accessible by any way except flying in or hiking in, who live in the Sierra Madres. And here I am, a Jewish kid who went to yeshiva in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm in the mountains of Mexico. And I haven't shown these before, but I first put them on Instagram about a week ago. And this is a Huichol shaman's belt. Let me see if I can get it into the camera. So when you go on the yearly pilgrimage to pick your buttons, and these are the shaman's hawk feathers. The person who leads the dance is leading the dance with these hawk feathers, who, while on peyote, are blazing. But I realized nobody was going to listen to me unless I had some credentials, you know, and I have many credentials. So I trained in internal medicine, cardiology, spent a decade being a director of an ER, got board certified in addiction medicine, 3 fields of forensic medicine, including forensic psychology. And I've been researching. My reason for becoming a physician was because I saw the medical benefit of psychedelics in somewhere around 1980. And I coined this term neuropsychiatric immunology. When I got back to the States, my path took me very far away from anything to have to do with psychedelics. And I went into emergency medicine because I'd like to say every patient interaction I've had since then, has been affected by that very first LSD trip. So let's talk a bit about why Ibogaine is important. We are facing a global pandemic of opiate abuse. 3 days ago, the Associated Press announced it's the highest opiate death rate in the history of opiate death rates, an increase of approximately 30% in the last year. And it's not going to stop. You know, as somebody board certified in addiction medicine since 1997, I never thought in 2021 I'd be saying, I wish the drugs were just for drugs. I wish the heroin was just heroin and the cocaine was just heroin and the LSD was just LSD. 75% of all the cocaine in the United States is cut with a poison called levamisole. All the heroin is fentanyl. And there are people actually selling fake blotter acid out there, contaminated with a substance called NBOME, which has actually killed people. And I've testified in a couple of these legal cases. So I'm a purist. You know, for the sake of brevity, we have thrown MDMA and ketamine into the field of psychedelics, when in fact, MDMA and ketamine, I don't believe are true psychedelics. They're extremely valuable healers. They are facilitators. We run a ketamine clinic here in Miami Beach, but we only do intravenous heroic doses of ketamine. Patients will have a breakthrough on that very first experience. I've been attending scientific conferences along with Rick and many other people here for some 30 years. And all those conferences were always about science, efficacy, and how do we get these drugs into the main course and available for people. Yeah, people have been doing psychedelics for thousands and thousands of years. Sometimes I wonder if every great jump in history, did Patanjali, did the Buddha, did Jesus, did every person who created quantum leaps in human behavior, did that come because they took some entheogenic drug? Did Jesus do some mushrooms and all of a sudden, you know, you have these great, I don't know the answer to that, but I wonder sometimes about it. So in 97, an esteemed professor from University of Miami who threatens to sue me all the time because I am not financially vested in any of these drugs. I am here just to give out information for free and hopefully get the message out here that, you know, we have the cure for opiate dependence, not addiction. Ibogaine does not create sustainable results, but it will get what takes me 90 days to detox a patient off opiates in the United States, which is a hellish 90 days. I can achieve in 12 to 24 hours with a single flood dose of Ibogaine. Unfortunately, many well-intentioned people will have done Ibogaine. I have a joke in one of my lectures, what happens when I give a heroin addicted, you know, young man Ibogaine, and I say he gets clean and opens up a clinic. So many clinics have opened up all over the world, some by profiteers, some by well-intentioned people. And unfortunately, there have been numerous deaths under Ibogaine because high doses of Ibogaine do have some cardiogenic effects. There is a way that this can be done safely. MAPS was kind enough in their spring journal of last year to publish an article I wrote called The Commercialization of Ibogaine. And if you'd like to read that, it's a concept of how Ibogaine could be done in the United States. It's a 23-hour hospital admit under $5,000 per treatment. And people, a fully addicted opiate addict would wake up the very next day stating, I'm 90 days ahead of the curve. I use the analogy, if a fentanyl or heroin addict gets arrested, gets thrown into a jail cell and sits there for 90 days, within 6 hours of taking Ibogaine, they are where they would be within 90 days in that jail cell. So, and it opens up a window of opportunity that after Ibogaine, having had this mystical experience, people become teachable and open to the concepts of, you know, whether they're 12-step programs, spirituality, whatever it may be. It opens up people to the thing they need to change for addiction, and that's one thing. And they say, what's the one thing? And I say, it's everything. What you need to change is everything. And now we're in the age of, it's interesting to me. Hoffman wrote a very interesting book called LSD, My Problem Child, okay? How do plant sacraments, plants that are plant teachers, they teach people proper ethics. How is this going to fit into the Western capitalistic civilization? Big Pharma's model that no drug is a good drug unless people have to take it forever, because we don't exist to find cures for disease. We exist to turn profits for our shareholders. I also, this whole thing that worries me, that they're going to find their way into the US system as a microdose. And I think the ultimate oxymoron is the term microdosing psychedelics, because there's nothing psychedelic about taking a microdose. I believe the heroic dose experience, proper setting, proper intention, proper drug, proper sitters, creates profound changes by giving people a mystical experience. It's not religion, it's spirituality, and it's proof of faith. You know, we all may be people of faith, but if you want proof that, you know, there is a universal consciousness, there's genetic memory that is timeless, has always been there and will always be there, and you will be accountable for your behavior in your death, you know, take a flood dose of psychedelics. For 40 years since I had my first LSD experience, everybody who told me they had taken LSD, I asked them the nature of their experience, and many people, they all don't have the same level of experiences. It's very individualistic. But how, you know, everybody right now is focusing on ketamine, which is a dissociative drug, not a psychedelic. So when I shut off my frontal cortex and we no longer have ego protective mechanisms, I can tap into, you know, universal consciousness. There's something very similar to the psychedelic experience, but I don't believe ketamine is a sacrament. And when I talk about drugs like peyote, DMT, LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and mescaline, I believe these drugs are actually sacraments. Now, these drugs actually pose a threat to several structures of Western civilization. Number two, big pharma's model of profit. Number two, politicians who cannot get elected unless they're taking PAC money from big pharma. They are the largest lobby in the United States. And number three, our US justice system you know, the United States, the most civilized country in the world, incarcerates more of our patient population than any other country in the world. And yet we're supposed to be the good guys. 80% of people in jails or prisons are there for drug or alcohol related crimes. And most of those are people of color because they can't afford fancy lawyers and they can't afford to bond out of jail. So there's a lot of obstacles to these drugs being brought here. But we're at a time now where everybody is seeking to own the rights to plants that are perfect. I'm going to tweak psilocybin, I'm going to tweak Ibogaine, I'm going to tweak this drug to come out with a unique molecule that may stop addiction, but is not psychoactive, or may be able to be taken in smaller doses. I believe these Mother Nature's plants are perfect as they were made. They don't need to be tweaked. People have been doing psychedelics for a long time. I am a great believer in the decriminalization of all drugs. You know, Nixon started a war on drugs. I'd like to start a new war, a war on addiction, a war on stupidity, and a war on killing of Mother Earth. We're at a time where many scholars will say we have 12 existential risks on this planet, which doesn't say 30 years from now this planet exists anymore. Things are polarizing very quickly. You know, Rick mentioned that studies need to be done in the United States, and you know, I'm so honored to be on a panel with Rick, because Rick, the first time I heard Rick's name was 1995, and he really was a pioneer in this and the first guy to put up any money to start this kind of research. The average cost, I've been a principal investigator in over 30, 40 clinical trials for major pharmaceutical companies on non-psychedelic drugs, vaccines, asthma inhalers, these sort of things. The average cost of bringing out a new simple antibiotic or a flu vaccine or an asthma inhaler is about $500 million. And that's if we didn't have the resistance from all these other political views. You know, if something works, people should have the right to try it. And I will tell you, it scares me now where only certain people with certain credentials will have the rights to use these drugs. I think if we're using these drugs to treat specific diseases, for instance, if you're going to be using Ibogaine to kill a very severe opiate addiction or to kill an alcohol dependence, This must be done by people who are trained in addiction medicine and psychiatry, as well as people who can handle all the possible cardiogenic problems that may occur under Ibogaine. I think I'm the only US physician doing this. I've probably done more flood dose psychedelic treatments than any licensed US physician alive, and I've never made my living off of these sacred plants. Because the sacred plant said to me something. I asked the sacred plant one time, do I need to give up all my worldly possessions? Is it okay to have things? And the plant teachers told me, no, my higher power says money is a valuable tool. Money is a valuable tool to having an enjoyable life. And God, my God, whatever God might be, my higher power says, have the most enjoyable life you can possibly have. You're here to enjoy every single day. Number two, money is extremely valuable tool in helping other people, and you have to play it forward. You have to help people. But there was one caveat on there. You can't make the money at anybody else's expense. And unfortunately, I see a lot of psychedelic profiteering going on. We recently had a conference where companies were selling bottles of water at $6 a bottle, calling it psychedelic water because they put kava in there. I also saw well-intentioned people, very well-intentioned, wealthy players, putting money behind companies which are not ethical, companies that are mailing ketamine to people's homes and saying, do this on your own, or we're going to do this by telemedicine. I don't think those models are safe, effective models of creating sustainable change. Being the Ibogaine guy, I am here to say that Ibogaine is the cure for opiate dependency in the face of a world opiate epidemic. And in the US model, people don't know this, but I've been detoxing people off opiates since 1995 as a board certified addiction doctor. I've actually had treatment centers in the United States. I ran a detox at Mount Sinai Hospital. I was able to use like opiates to get people off opiates. So if you had an opiate habit, I was able to give you other opiates and slowly taper those down. It was painful, it was difficult. It took 90 days to feel comfortable again, but it was doable. About 10 years ago, the United States government changed the law that stated no doctor, board certified in addiction medicine or not, even in a hospital setting, can use a class 2 drug. That means morphine, methadone, dihydromorphone, any opiate except for Suboxone, which is a class 3 drug. I can no longer use opiates to detox a patient off opiates. Now, how absurd. We have gone 50 years back into the past, more than 50 years, because methadone has been around for more than 50 years. I can no longer use methadone to detox a patient in the hospital. And where does this come from? The company that makes Suboxone, and there are other companies that make buprenorphine, are saying the best any addict can do is to stay addicted to another opiate. It's harm, and they call this a harm reduction model. And when I have a 22-year-old kid coming in saying, I'm on 24 milligrams of Suboxone, that's a life sentence, okay? And you're gonna be taking this drug for the rest of your life.
It's about time, by the way.
Rest of your life. Okay, I'm going to end here. Thank you, Lakshmi. This is an amazing panel to be on, an amazing organization. I hope many people join. And let me just take 60 seconds to discuss feet. Right now, I get 5 or 6 calls a week for patients asking for referrals to Ibogaine clinics. There is not a single clinic that I believe is treating patients at the level of safety and care with the proper psychospiritual model that should go along with a flood dose of Ibogaine. I am currently in talks with some very smart people to possibly open up these clinics at a very, very affordable price, so that proper Ibogaine treatment may in the near future be available in a model where nobody dies. There's proper aftercare. We have this motto: not one more death. No one needs to die from opiate addiction. And thank you for hearing me.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very inspiring to see what Ibogaine can be doing for us as a society. And thank you for all your work advancing it, especially with the medical health side that can be so tricky. And now our next guest will be Talia Eisenberg. She is a serial entrepreneur who focuses on developing consumer-facing products and services in the wellness and psychedelic industry. She's the founder of the Ibogaine Research Institute, a nonprofit in San Francisco, and their mission is to raise funds and awareness about the use of Ibogaine for opioid addiction interruption. Currently, she's a founding partner of a new startup designed to democratize access to medically safe and enduring treatments for addiction and trauma utilizing Ibogaine and other psychedelics. She's been featured in many prominent publications like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and she's written about her personal experiences with Ibogaine for the Huffington Post, which is always one of the best ways to get this stuff out here. That's what people really believe. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Talia Eisenberg.
Hi, everyone. I am in Sonoma. Just wanted to say hello. It's a sunny day. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. Yes, my name is Talia Eisenberg, and I'm by no means an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a scientist, but I can speak as someone who was actively addicted in my early 20s to opiates and successfully used Ibogaine in a single night. And it's been a decade now since that night, and I've been alcohol and opiate free since then. So I really understand the addict's plight and why we need to scale this solution in a safe way. I have more questions than I do answers, but I do have a deep knowing when it comes to Ibogaine. I would love to see this medicine work for more people, and I think it's possible to scale this treatment safely to reach more and prevent deaths and overdoses. As Dr. Kimlin mentioned, a few days ago in the New York Times, the article came out that told how 100,000 people, which is an all-time record, have overdosed from opiates in the last year. This is a serious epidemic. In order to treat everyone that's died of an overdose in the last year, we would need a minimum of 273 treatments every day for the 365 days that we have in a year. And today, while there's Ibogaine clinics and people are working very hard, most of these treatments can only take 10 to 15 people a month, if that. So this is a problem that needs to be worked on. How can we treat more people effectively and safely? We know that 2.5 million Americans a year go to rehab, yet there's probably more like 10 million Americans who would like to go, yet they can't afford it and they don't have the time. Of those 2.5 million Americans who do go to rehab, it works for about less than 10%, the numbers show. I've read 5% in some cases. This is partially because traditional rehab models don't get to the core of the trauma fast enough, and partially because it takes months for neurology to shift in traditional treatment models. And before they get to that point, people tend to relapse. Ibogaine is miraculous because in 1 or 2 sessions, it can give you a physiological reset while including that spiritual awakening that Lakshmi was speaking about. Addiction is a mix between the two: physiological, spiritual, psychological. 3, you lose faith in yourself or anything greater than yourself, and you make your drug of choice or the behavior your higher power, and you physically lose the choice to stop. So Ibogaine gives you that choice back. Yet it's not available in the US, and it's a Schedule I drug. And, I want to talk a little bit about my experience with Ibogaine over a decade ago. I had a lot of family trauma. I come from a lineage of Holocaust survivors. I didn't have the early coping skills. I didn't learn them from my family. And then, of course, there's genetic addiction issues. And I always wanted to fill that hole inside of me, which, I call a spiritual malady. So Ibogaine interrupted that addiction and gave me time to learn new behavioral mechanisms, heal the shame and wounds that I carried. Today I'm married. I've been able to stay married and for the most part be happy. I have a child. I finished my MBA in sustainability. I've started a number of companies to help other people. I continue my spiritual practices, and now I work on Ibogaine as a solution. And what intrigued me most about awake.net when Lakshmi came to me is the FEAT grant program, which plans to treat people addicted to opiates who couldn't otherwise afford treatment. This is something that I think a lot about. I think within my world and our community, it's somewhat of a bubble. A lot of people are using these medicines and we're seeing breakthroughs, and they're doing it in a safe way with therapists, as Rick spoke about, but so many other people, probably 90% of the public doesn't have access. So I think awake.net's really important because this collaboration piece as a community is key to learning more and creating better resources among the group. The awake.net and other decentralized networks I'm seeing lately are able to crowdsource the best ideas, and there's not one central person making decisions or holding all the power. Something I want to touch on quickly is what we plan to do at awake.net. We're working on a series of blogs and panels on various topics. Topics we would like to explore as a community are, profile of an addiction. What is addiction? So the DSM-5 says addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive seeking of the substance or behavior. It continues on despite harmful consequences and long-lasting changes in the brain. It is considered both a complex brain disorder and a mental illness. So addiction is not will-based. People think, I guess the general perception is people think you can just stop, but yet we have Ibogaine, which is an addiction interrupter. It's not a silver bullet, as many people will say, and you must do the work to stop and to create a new life. But Ibogaine is a great starting point when done safely and effectively. For me, Ibogaine interrupted the physical addiction and gave me the willingness and desire to want to do the work. I didn't believe in myself before I found this medicine. I wasn't willing to do the deeper work. In my journey that night, I saw, my grandmother, who was this incredible Holocaust survivor woman who wasn't a victim. She helped a lot of people in the world after she came out of that. She gave me the strength and showed me, I saw also where I was missing the mark and how to change my life. My experience with getting addicted to opiates was that I went to a dentist at 19. I was given Vicodin, and then I started doing harder opiates because I couldn't get any more Vicodin. Went to multiple rehabs in a year period, traditional rehabs. They probably kept me alive, but they didn't. After 3 weeks, I would always neurologically need an opiate. So doing Ibogaine really taught me about the need for the aftercare piece. I unfortunately had to do it on my own. I didn't have a lot of resources back then. I spent a lot of time hiking in the mountains in Boulder. I didn't have a community, and I'm hoping that, resources like awake.net can be this for others today. I've seen many people fail at their desired outcome for staying off their drug of choice because they don't have the community or therapeutic resources. I think the other thing we can talk about at awake.net is various protocols for various addictions. I see within our community, ketamine addiction is becoming a problem because people are taking it off label and they're using it without experts in smaller doses more frequently. I believe there's specific Ibogaine protocols for this versus methadone or heroin detoxes. There's behavioral addictions. More than ever, people are addicted to sex and food. So the question is, how do we approach this treatment protocol differently than, say, a physical detox to opiates? What other entheogens are best for various addictions? Applying for the FEAT program. Who is this for and what is the screening process? This is something we'll be talking about. Setting intention and integration, how to approach a flood dose journey with Ibogaine. What does a safe Ibogaine treatment look like? Screening, medical equipment, medical team, resources for people who want to use this medicine, and questions they should ask providers. I believe we should arm people with questions, people that want these treatments, so they can get the safe care that they need. There's questions on detox protocols, cleaning, and nutrition. I think pre and post care are arguably just as important as the actual treatment. How do we prepare people, and how do we people keep the greatest benefit? How do we give people the greatest benefits for their desired achievable outcomes? I know for me, the nutrition and hormone piece was huge and very valuable. You know, the microbiome is said to be our second brain. Treatment itself, what happens in body, mind, and spirit when Ibogaine is taken? Many people see visions of their life like a movie and are able to clear fears and past traumas. Many people find God. And of course, you're forced to look at what has been holding you back. Ibogaine is said to stay in your liver for 90 days. And this is very important because you're able to bring in new changes, new behavioral changes. And then I think the aftercare options are important. The first year is incredibly challenging. What resources are available to help people? How do people afford them? I was able to go to a MAPS trained psychedelic therapist in Boulder named Marcella, if any of you know her, but many people aren't fortunate enough to have those resources. So how do we solve that problem? What should people expect when they go home? And then, of course, there's sustainability issues around Ibogaine or Iboga. Are there alternative plants we can use? Voacangine is something discussed. Analogs are being developed. And another thing that worries me is that Westerners are taking and selling Iboga from Gabon to other Westerners, and there's an increase in alcoholism among Bwiti as their land is stripped. I just read an article about that last week. So taking from this community to try and solve the problem in our community is creating the very same issue in that community. That doesn't make sense. I think I was muted.
Accidental muting.
No worries. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've been talking for a while, so I think I'll wrap up anyhow. But through the power of community and group buy-in, especially now with decentralized communities, we can answer some of these questions and help more people who want Ibogaine support for an addiction. And before I wrap up, I want to leave you with the following. We live in a very unique historical moment related to innovation of treatment methods for addiction. This is a psychedelic renaissance that has gone mainstream. The risks before us are very real and missing an opportunity to create something truly new, safe, and truly different with the interest of the suffering front of mind. We call on you to join us in the use of awake.net to inspire and educate and not repeat the problems of our past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Talia. That's very inspiring to hear about your journey and how it's going to help others. Thank you for sharing today. And coming up next, we have Kathy Coyle. And Kathy holds a master's in applied psychology from University College Cork, Ireland. And she's currently studying for a PhD in transpersonal psychology with the California Integral Institute. She shares that she was on the path towards becoming a clinical psychologist when a spontaneous mystical experience diverted her onto the road of shamanic initiation. So now Kathy is an indigenous Bandri, a Gaelic wise woman, and her company, Dree, is built upon a merging of modern psychology with ancient nature-based traditions. In her work, she leads individuals through visionary journeys, combined with nature vigils and wild spaces, as well as working as a transpersonal coach supporting people through spiritual emergence. She has apprenticed under Celtic shamanic teachers, using practices such as tree shamanism, herbalism, trance journeying, and mushroom medicine. Kathy identifies as a practitioner of witchcraft and is passionate about educating people on indigenous shamanic traditions of the women of Western Europe and supporting a return to local folk practices and feminine esoteric arts. So today she offers transformational retreats in Cape Town, South Africa and Cork, Ireland. Her retreats combine breathwork, nature quest, embodiment practices, and entheogenic medicines. She's also the host of a new podcast, Meet Me in the Mushroom, which is housed on the awake.net platform. Just one thing you can do on the awake.net platform of many. And they explore a range of issues from psychiatry, ethics, and integration to occultism and shamanism, self-healing, the hero's dose psychedelic journey, tantra, yoga, and mindfulness. You can see more about her work at kathycoyle.com. And we are very pleased today to invite Kathy to our stage.
I'm here.
Second. There we go.
Thank you, Lex. Wow, I'm just beyond, I'm a little bit speechless even to be sitting here and hearing Rick Doblin speak and Jeffrey Campbell and Talia's story and Lakshmi, and to be here sitting with my mentor, Shauna Home. It's just a huge, huge privilege, and everybody else that's on the board. I'm so honored. And I'm here in Cape Town, so it's 11 p.m. at night here. It's very windy and dark outside, so I'm really happy to be coming in with expanding beyond just the United States, expanding out into the wider global community, because there are so many of us in the entheogenic community that have a lot to say and have a lot to offer each other. And I guess my space within awake.net with the podcast that I'm hosting, Meet Me in the Mushroom, is to be a voice for, as Jeffrey said, as Lakshmi touched on, to be a voice for nature traditions, to be a voice that there are other ways outside of addiction treatment, therapeutic practices. There are indigenous practices and nature-based traditions that involve these plant medicines, and they really need a voice now, because we spoke the figures about how much money is being invested and all of the privatization as part of the clinic, as the renaissance, the psychedelic renaissance, which is absolutely incredible. But there's a lot of danger zones here. The synthesization of psilocybin, this is something that makes me personally quite uncomfortable, because I have an intimate relationship with this consciousness. I understand how it wants to interact with humans, to support them, guide them, heal, awaken, all of that, which is contained within the most perfect creation of the psilocybin mushroom. So women as well, female voices that are coming from this type of practicum, that are dedicating their lives to reconnecting to nature, I think that's a really important bridge. And with the podcast, I'm so excited because I'm trying to create a narrative, because within all spectrums, there has to be ethics. So even within my craft, my practice, and the other individuals I know who work in a more shamanistic way with various plant medicines, there are serious issues with ethics. There is serious issues with the ability of the guide, what is their background, what is their training, how much work have they done with the plant that they're holding. Just like a clinical therapist, as Rick Doblin mentioned earlier, needs to understand the substance that they're holding and able to hold space properly. And so we're creating dialogue so that various practitioners can come together, that we can create a space for mentors and masters, so we can create dialogue, and that we can keep each other in check ultimately, that we can mentor and guide and find peer support for each other. If I hadn't had the support I have from Shauna and other teachers that I work with, I could have very easily gotten lost or overwhelmed in my development as a mushroom medicine woman. But we're building community, we're building conversation, we're building space. And I'm really, really passionate also about Indigenous voices, different cultural voices, different community voices. How are different people in different pockets of societies working with various psychedelic substances, everything from recreationally to psychospiritually? And I'm here in Cape Town, and it's a really diverse community here. And I'm so blessed to work a lot with people from the Khoisan and learn about their herbalism and understand how that can support me as I'm working with mushroom, and how I can use that to support others as they're preparing their bodies, or what plants can help people integrate from this big experience, because it does affect the nervous system. It affects the nervous system. It affects the body. It's a lot of chi when you're going into this type of space. So how do we help understand the path of the wise woman or the herbalist also as a support for preparation and integration for psychedelic journeys? And so Meet Me in the Mushroom has a broad range of very, very interesting, very diverse people. We've already filmed 6 episodes that are going to be launching. We're going to be launching with the first episode, which is an interview with myself. And from there, I'm interviewing British occultists. I'm interviewing Afro-Caribbean medicine men and Bushmen and tobacco medicine women from Peru, and understanding how does tobacco come in as an ally if you're preparing for plant medicine work, and educating people on these things, the non-psychotropic elements as well, and how they all weave into a grid and a network of support, because this I think is an essential conversation. And I am so grateful to awake.net that they are willing, that everybody here is willing to hold space for this level of conversation, and that there is a respect within it that our backgrounds, our credentials, our knowledge as psychonauts is what has brought us here. And we're meeting each other on an equal playing field. There is no hierarchy within this space. And so I really encourage everybody that's watching this evening to, get involved. This is something really special at a time when we really need to come together in global community, not just our local communities with people we see, but in global communities, because this is the technology age. This is the age of Aquarius. So how do we reclaim the technologies? How do we reclaim the conversation? Because the conversation has been hijacked, and we are here to be a voice and say, no, this is not okay. This is how things are supposed to be. This is how nature has intended it. This is how science can merge with nature and merge with integrity and merge with truth, so that we can all move forward together. And yeah, I'm just really, really excited. So thank you. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for giving me the space to speak from my heart, and yeah, to speak to you from Africa tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing. That was really inspiring, and we're excited for your new show. That sounds really great, especially starting with interviewing yourself. You got to, just makes sense. And so now we will go on to Dr. Sunil K Agarwal, who is our next guest. And he is actually an old friend of mine. Many years ago when I was a young writer, he graciously sat down with me for a very long interview, even though it didn't help him at all. And he just continued to help others since then. This is actually just half of his introduction. He has so much going on in his life. He is a physician and a medical geographer. He is the co-founder and co-director of the Ames Institute in Seattle, which is a teaching clinic and research institute offering with specializations in oncology, psychiatry, neurology, rehabilitation, pain, and palliative care. In fact, in the field of palliative care, that academy named him a top 20 emerging leader. He's a member of physician groups associated with psychedelics, cannabis, palliative care, naturopathic medicines, and family medicine. As a former National Science Foundation graduate research fellow, he completed his PhD dissertation on the medical geography of cannabinoid botanicals in Washington State, access, delivery, and distress. And he is presently a co-investigator on the Ames Cancer Outcome Study, the Ames Medical Outcome Study, and the Canadian Psilocybin Safety Initiative Registry. He's published over 36 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. He's a member of the board of directors of the End of Life Washington and the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy. And perhaps most famously, he is now still willing to allow his cancer patients the right to try psilocybin. He has been all over the news with that. For his fun facts, Sunil enjoys playing tuned percussion instruments. He's a father of 2 young ones, aged 8 and aged 10 months. So hopefully he's getting some sleep. And he was born and raised in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I join you from the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, who are the original stewards of the land, past and present. I honor with gratitude the land and the sea itself and the Duwamish tribe. Thank you to Lakshmi for having the vision to build a nonprofit organization to serve entheogenic flourishing for our world and the more than human world. Thank you to my fellow speakers. And thank you to our MC, Lex, who I have long wanted to collaborate with. We met for the first time nearly a decade ago in a Manhattan diner where Lex invited me to be interviewed for a graphic novel he was working on called People of the Cannabinoids. I'm proud to announce today that the Ames Institute, based in the Pacific Northwest, occupied Duwamish territory of Seattle, Washington, overlooking Lake Union, has formed a partnership with the registered nonprofit awake.net to further our shared mission values of social equity and health justice. The Ames Institute, as Lex mentioned, is a research, teaching, medical and psychotherapeutic care private outpatient clinic, co-founded in the summer of 2018 by my esteemed partner, who you'll hear from next, naturopathic oncologist and neuroscientist, Dr. Leanna Standish, and I. Ames Institute offers advanced integrative therapies, including, among others, ketamine and cannabis facilitated entheogenic therapy, and is especially focused on care for patients with chronic, serious, life-threatening illness and mental health conditions traditionally covered under the umbrellas of oncology, psychiatry, neurology, pain, rehabilitation, and palliative care. We provide coordinated, team-based, integrative medical and therapeutic care and education in individual and group settings, in person and virtually, by licensed and board-certified allopathic medicine physicians, specialists, specialized naturopathic medicine physicians, skilled psychotherapists, advanced practice and registered nurses, a clinical social worker, and partnered health educators. We conduct IRB-approved clinical outcome studies to study the effectiveness of our treatments. We offer an experiential training certificate in ketamine-assisted entheogenic therapy for providers, have a nationally accredited residency program for naturopathic physicians, and have created a mini residency for psychiatric nurse practitioners and a psychotherapist associateship. We precept medical students, residents, and fellows from other programs. We are an in-network clinic, and the vast majority of the medical and therapeutic care services we provide are covered by insurance, including Medicare and some Medicaid. However, many of the advanced approaches we provide, including entheogen-assisted therapy, medical cannabis education, sympathetic ganglion blocks, advanced intravenous therapies, and advanced intravenous therapies are generally considered experimental and uncovered by insurance. Their out-of-pocket cost limits their accessibility by many suitable patients who lack financial resources. However, we recognize the right of everyone to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and its applications, as stated in Article 15 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Thus, we have established the Ames Social Equity Entheogenic Care Fund on awake.net, launching today, to create a pathway for the general public to give tax-deductible donations to improve the reach of our patient care and research missions. We additionally have established a patient financial aid application now available on awake.net for prospective patients. This will help us direct Ames charitable service and donations we receive to support the care of patients who need it most. Funds can be designated to particular patients, to our general fund, or to particular research funds. Another project I would like to highlight, as Lex alluded to, is our effort to secure legal access to psilocybin-assisted therapy for seriously ill patients who qualify under state and federal right to try laws to receive an eligible investigational new drugs for therapeutic purposes. The clinic, myself, and 2 patients with advanced cancer have filed a petition in the US 9th Circuit Court of Appeals to review the decision made earlier this year by the US Drug Enforcement Administration, who offered us no license path to acquire psilocybin from a registered supplier for therapeutic use for bona fide legal right to try purposes. We have been represented in this effort by the Emerge Law Group based in Portland, Oregon, with lead counsel Ms. Catherine Tucker. A bevy of attorneys have done pro bono and low bono work to develop the legal arguments, write briefs, and gather supporters. We have received amicus brief support from the Washington State Office of the Attorney General, along with a coalition of attorney generals from several states. Experts like Drs. Matthew Johnson and Roland Griffiths, leading researchers, leaders in the palliative care community, and an established 2-hospital healthcare system in Washington, law professors, and many other allies. We hope that the court will listen to them and that the DEA will approve the prescription of psilocybin so that it can be used by others for the same purpose as well. The attorneys have set up a legal defense fund in partnership with the Colorado-based NOAC Society, a 501c3. Please go there to support their efforts. Our general fund on awake.net will also support the efforts of our clinic to continue this fight on behalf of our patients. We had a hearing before the court in early September, and we await a decision any day. In closing, I want to say that I do believe a future is possible in which we create a public health system in which the core principles of integrative health and medicine are foundational. In such a system, we would universalize respect and protection for spiritual health, as well as physical and mental health and safety. And there is no way to respect spiritual health without respecting and protecting one of humanity's oldest methods for achieving states of awe, entheogenesis. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Doctor. It's good to see you. That was beautiful. And it's exciting to hear all of the great work going on in all of these different directions. Thank you very much for your work. And there is information in the chat about how you can support what AIMS is doing. And we're about to hear from another director of AIMS. Though, since you mentioned people with the cannabinoids, I did get 2 of them done. So if you want to see graphic novels based on, about the endocannabinoid system based on Moby Dick, they are at lexpelger.com. There's three of them finished already, only 132 more to go. And so thank you for the little pitch and for the interview long ago. And as we said, with more from the AIMS Institute, we have Dr. Deanna Standish. She is a neuroscientist and physician living in Seattle, and she is a co-founder of the AIMS Institute, as well as the Sacred Medicines Public Benefit Corporation. Her brain research is focused on the use of functional MRI imaging of the human brain to investigate consciousness, which is fascinating work. And her medical practice focuses on integrative oncology care and clinical research. In addition, in 2003, she became the steward of a Hawaiian ethnobotanical rainforest preserve created by Kathleen Harrison, Dennis McKenna, Luis Eduardo Luna, and Terrace McKenna in the 1980s. And so now we're pleased to hear from Dr. Deanna Standish.
I am so happy to be on this panel. My fascination with ayahuasca began in 1999 when I was investigating brain correlates of human consciousness. I've been using fMRI technology at the University of Washington. As a brain scientist, I've always been fascinated by the mind-body problem, the nature and origin of consciousness. My end goal has been to be able to study the transpersonal effects of ayahuasca using real-time brain imaging methods. My other end goal was to make ayahuasca therapy more available to my patients, and especially to my mother, who committed suicide several years before my first ayahuasca ceremony. If only I could have shown her ayahuasca in the depth of her depression. In 2003, I became steward of an ethnobotanical preserve in Hawaii, where Banisteriopsis copii and Psychotria viridis thrive, the two plants that are commonly used to make ayahuasca tea. It was then that I began lab research to measure dimethyltryptamine and harmful alkaloids in ayahuasca teas that I collected from ceremonies conducted in Peru, Brazil, mainland United States, and even Hawaii itself. At the end of each ceremony, I respectfully approached the ayahuasca healer to ask if I might have a small sample of the tea that we had drunk the night before, and without exception, each healer gladly gave me a sample. I was surprised, and saying, please, please do Western research on this amazing medicina. I was amazed to discover that despite the diversity of sources of plants, the healer's tradition, diversity in the country where the tea was made, there was remarkably similar dimethyltryptamine content across these teas. With the help of traditional healers, scientific colleagues, and students, we learned how to make a standardized, potent, organically grown ayahuasca tea. And in 2016, I submitted to the Food and Drug Administration an application asking them to give me permission to conduct human research in the United States. The FDA favorably reviewed the protocol, but requested more chemistry data before we could begin the trial. And so we've been working on that for the last 5 years. In 2018, Sunil Agarwal and I started Ames Institute, partially in order to be able to provide psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy to our patients. And as you heard, in 2019, we began doing IRB-approved outcome studies with our patients to make sure that our results were objectively demonstrated. Then in 2018, I met Dr. Victoria Hale. Dr. Hale is a pharmaceutical chemist. She's a former FDA employee, and she's also founder of 2 very successful nonprofit pharmaceutical companies that are focused on global health. She's currently the chairwoman of MAPS Board of Directors. In 2020, Dr. Hale and I formed Sacred Medicines Public Benefit Corporation, which is a woman-owned psychedelic botanical drug company. The mission of our company is to bring safe, standardized, whole plant, polymolecular, complex psychedelic botanical medicines to scientists, clinicians, healers, and ultimately to patients. We at Sacred Medicines slowed down our work in the last 2 years in order to develop our reciprocity program that respects, honors, and acknowledges the indigenous traditional healers, the indigenous scientists, and the indigenous cultures that developed ayahuasca tea, and the full system of deep medical care many, many centuries, probably thousands of years ago. We at Sacred Medicines believe in the Nagoya Protocol. We agree in principle with the concept of requiring prior informed consent from the ancient inventors of ayahuasca in order to bring ayahuasca to North America and to the West. But which of the 102 Amazonian rainforest indigenous nations has the authority to provide such consent? Which tribal group gets to decide? Who should we ask? We at Sacred Medicines believe also in sharing access and benefit from the transfer of indigenous traditional medical knowledge to us in the West. We now better understand the resistance to the idea of medicalization of ayahuasca. We understand why we Westerners are not trusted. Why would indigenous cultures trust us? When our white patriarchal ancestors came to the Amazon basin more than 500 years ago, bringing disease, oppressive Christianity, and profit motive of capitalism, the death of indigenous culture, the death of communities, and ultimately the death of nature that Western culture inevitably brings with it. Why would any indigenous group give us permission after what our culture has done to them? Ayahuasca is the most potent medicine I have ever encountered as a doctor. Many Westerners have now experienced the wonders by traveling to South America. There's a growing cadre of Western ayahuasca healers who've dedicated their entire lives to training under experienced shaman in South America. And currently in the United States, they work underground and they work at great personal risk. We envision a time when nature is decriminalized in the West, and these responsible, trained ayahuasca healers can do their healing work in safety. We in the West cannot pretend that we understand the unseen energies that are central to ayahuasca healing. Unlike the Amazonian rainforest shaman, we Westerners are not yet adept at transpersonal medicine. Years and years of dedicated training under the mentorship of an experienced healer is needed. We have so much to learn from grandmother ayahuasca and her healers. We at Sacred Medicines have come to understand that ayahuasca is a sacred tea and it's a sacred practice, and it cannot be imported into the US medical system. Ayahuasca cannot be commercialized. Ayahuasca should not be commercialized. We can learn from our South American elders. We can study the healing methods. We can engage in deep, meaningful conversations, and perhaps over time, build trust and collaboration. Sunil Agarwal and I started AIMS Institute in Seattle so that we would be ready to do ayahuasca human research. We have learned how to provide safe and effective ketamine-assisted psychotherapy to our patients with mental illness, chronic pain, cancer-related demoralization, and the existential despair that comes with a life-threatening illness. In the meantime, Dr. Hale and I and our Sacred Medicines teams of scientists and clinicians are dedicated to making psychedelic, sacred whole medicines for scientific brain research, clinical research, and for qualified healers. We are growing, protecting, and sustainably harvesting these sacred plants in Hawaii. We need help to grow and protect the plants. We need volunteers. We need research funds. And we are pleased and honored to be part of the awake.net and Lakshmi's marvelous platform where we can all come together in a single site in order to advance ethical, safe, psychedelic therapy for all who need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Standish. That was very inspiring, and we wish you all the best of luck with AIMS and all the work moving forward. The work that you and Dr. Agarwal are doing is fantastic. So thank you so much for that forceful and excellent presentation. And that is why that we had Dr. Standish be our cleanup hitter for the first half of this awake.net launch. We are now going to take a 10-minute bio break. So we'll be back at the 40-minute mark, wherever you are in the world. It will be at 40. And just to let you know, this recording will be sent as pretty much as soon as this is done. And we will save the chat for people as well. So you can peruse all the links that are in there and all the delightful chatter that's going back and forth. And just one more reminder, awake.net is open for donations. And so we are seeking nonprofit startup seed sponsors who want to help start these great projects going. Though these donations might not be tax deductible quite yet as the tax status is getting finalized, but this is a great project to give to, and it can go a long way helping all of these different people expand the medicine, expand entheogenesis around the world. So thank you so much, and we will see all of you in 10 minutes. I will put the I Ching back up so you can all enjoy it. Seriously, if you're not using the I Ching, you should. And I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Oop. Damn. Hello, everyone. We're back. Hopefully your bio break went well and you got all the snacks you need. So we have 6 speakers left. And one thing I'd like to say is you should definitely stick around until the last speaker, Jack Cross. He is talking about a fascinating topic, and he's just a fascinating speaker as well. So it's definitely worth sticking around until the end to hear him and then the closing remarks from our dear host, Lakshmi. And so for now, our next speaker is Andrew Deweese. He is a co-leader of Green Light Law Group, one of the country's foremost cannabis and psychedelic law firms. He founded the Oregon Cannabis Law Group in 2014 and is also the founder of the Oregon State Bar Cannabis and Psychedelic section. He focuses his practice on complex litigation within emerging cannabis and psychedelic industries. And in 2019, he led the Green Light Law Group legal team that prevailed against the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to strike down Oregon's short-lived ban on flavored cannabis vape products. Let me be the first to say, woohoo! That kind of junk doesn't get us anywhere. So good fight. And not just a lawyer, he also earned a performer diploma in viola performance from Indiana University and was formerly a professional caliber orchestral violist who was touring throughout Europe and the Americas. So it's always fascinating to see a lawyer who can do many other interesting things. And so now I'm pleased to present Andrew Deweese.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me today. It's been really amazing to see all of the panelists so far, and I'm hoping that I can make a useful contribution here as well. Like Lex said, I'm with Greenlight Law Group. We have offices in Seattle, our main office is in Portland, and we have a satellite office in Medford, Oregon. What I do, as Lex said, is I focus on litigation. I'm a trial lawyer by training. So when somebody's really in trouble, normally they talk to me. Someone is like a cannabis licensee is in danger of losing their license, they come to me. And so we're looking forward to helping folks in the Measure 109 program, and we are currently helping several clients in the entheogenic community. But the law firm is a full service law firm, so we do really it all for these businesses. What I'm really passionate about in the context of this presentation is, you know, the possibility of a new industry here in Oregon and then throughout the country and the world. It's not totally new. It's probably one of the most ancient industries, but we've really legalized it here in Oregon, and we've legalized it in a really great way that I hope will I hope that the framework that we've got in Oregon protects somewhat against the inevitable consolidation, you know, that we saw in so many other industries, definitely the cannabis industry. I think that Measure 109 is set up in a way where that doesn't have to happen. It's not just Measure 109 though, it's the community of folks who I think have an interest in Measure 109 and being psychedelic therapists and participating in this industry. If you have an interest in psychedelics, you've had a profound experience, you've realized the interconnectedness of all of us. You've gotten in touch with the, you know, tens of thousands of years of human prehistory in which our ancestors did not live under a white supremacist capitalist system and didn't have all of the problems that we are facing these days, yet nevertheless lived together in harmony for many years. The other reason, you know, is, and so because of that experience, I think folks here will hopefully gravitate towards being together in, you know, modalities like awake.net and hopefully other modalities in order to advocate for themselves, for mutual aid among folks in the industry, and to advocate for better treatment for their clients. Another reason why I think the Measure 109 system in Oregon doesn't necessarily have to go that way, is the way the Measure 109 is put together. So just briefly, under Measure 109, there will be 4 types of licenses. There's the facilitator license, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, the products license to manufacture products, the service center, where a client can meet facilitators and be administered psilocybin, and then the testing license. So facilitators under the Measure 109 system will actually be independently licensed professionals subject to a code of ethics and defined standards of professional conduct. They're not, this is not a medical modality. The Measure 109 system is purposefully set up to allow people to access psilocybin in a non-medical way. For whatever reason you want to access psilocybin, you can do it under Measure 109. The facilitators will be graduates of qualified and approved training programs that will be open to anyone under over 21 and with a high school diploma, and until January 1st, 2025, you have to be an Oregon resident. After that, the residency requirement goes away. The statute mandates that the education and training that psilocybin facilitators will go through will have a particular emphasis on facilitation skills that are affirming, non-judgmental, and non-directive. A psychedelic service facilitator will engage in basically 3 types of sessions with a client. The first one is required, which is a preparation session, which may but does not have to occur at a service center. After the client undergoes this session, the facilitator will certify that the client has gone through it and must certify that before the administration session. The administration session is where at the psilocybin service center, the facilitator, the client in the presence of the facilitator ingests the psilocybin and metabolizes it under the supervision of the facilitator. The third session is the integration session. It is not required under the statute. However, as we all know, it's very, very important. The facilitator license is not actually tied to any one premises. So I believe what we'll have here is a new a class of therapists where independently licensed professionals will be able to access patients in a very effective way because of the non-judgmental and affirming nature of their training. I think we're in great shape here to resist the gold rush type of mentality that we saw in the cannabis industry, because there will be so many licensees, and I hope that we can keep it very decentralized. What we've seen in the cannabis industry is really a gold rush mentality, which I don't think will be the same here. We've seen now consumers concentrate mainly on price and potency rather than anything else that goes into the product. There's very little concern about how the product is grown. It's a bad situation. I don't believe the same thing will happen in psilocybin because of the way the law is set up and because of the practitioners who are coming into the practice. One thing that I would love to sort of plug here is that there will be in Oregon a Psychedelic Therapists Association where folks are able to join together and again to advocate for the profession and advocate for their clients. I hope that everyone pays attention to what's going on in Oregon, I think that it will be hopefully a model for the rest of the country in terms of non-commercialization, accessing psychedelics in a safe, not judgmental manner. And so I hope everybody watches what's going on here. We have the opportunity to not go down the same road as we did in cannabis, and I really hope we use it. Thanks again to Lakshmi and Await.net and to all my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for the note of hope on the legal side, because it can often seem like such a whale to be battling that it can feel hopeless. So it's great to have lawyers out you who are cutting through the red tape and making the world better. So thank you very much for the presentation. And so next we have Eric Swenson. And Eric is a writer, editor, and psychedelic activist who had his first acid trip in 1965, which for historians is when the 60s actually began. And he's been a serious psychonaut ever since. After teaching writing for several years at colleges and universities in Washington and Oregon, he became a writer, and he co-authored 6 different books, authored or co-authored 6 different books, and wrote 200 articles on subjects like commercial fishing, forsenic DNA, child development, legal education, baseball, and drug use in America. But now Eric focuses exclusively on psychedelic assisted healing and the religious use of these sacraments. He edits an ayahuasca website, kahpi.net, that's KAHPI.net, I'll put it into the links, as well as for awake.net, and the International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research, and Service. He is also the founder of Holly House, a place of healing which promotes public education on psychedelic healing, training in psychedelic therapy, and relief for end-of-life distress. He plans on Seattle becoming the second sacred garden community in the US after Oakland. So now I give it away to Eric. Oop. You're good now.
Okay. Hold on a second. Let me get my, when I went away, it went away. Thank you for that introduction. You missed my funny fact though, which is I've been to Burning Man 15 times and learned so much about psychedelics and psychedelic healing. It was my wonderful privilege to be able to be campmates with Sasha and Anne Shulgin and with the wonderful Amanda Fielding. So these are some of the iconic figures who have helped shape my views and hopes for psychedelic healing. So I'd like to begin by saying that this November is perhaps the most significant month in my life. I entered my 8th decade with much to celebrate. Most relevant to this gathering is that in 2013, I organized a conference on psychedelic healing at Burning Man and learned about Ibogaine. Ever since then, I have yearned to help bring this incredibly effective medicine to bear on the nation's currently intractable opioid epidemic. With Awake.net's launch today, I finally can. I also finished a project I began 18 years ago, building a naturalistic waterfall in my backyard, to my son's full astonishment, as he's seen many previous efforts in this direction go awry. So I'd like to tell you about the Sacred Garden community. It is a church that I am a member of. I first became aware of the Sacred Garden community in Jamaica in April of 2019, when I attended their 6-day training in the therapeutic use of psilocybin. Since mushrooms are legal in Jamaica, all participants actually took psilocybin. Once I returned, I followed the training with a 6-week onboarding. I have attended Sunday services one might say religiously, ever since, and visited the Oakland Church in 2020 and again this September. I will take additional training in facilitation in Oakland early in 2022. I have asked to establish a second Sacred Garden Church here in Seattle and anticipate being granted a provisional charter by next March. We refer to ourselves as the Church of Least Dogma. Indeed, the only thing you must believe to be a member is that it is possible for entheogens, which we consider to be sacraments, to allow us to directly experience the divine in our lifetime. What SGC has done for me is make me a better person as I strive to embody and practice our core values: care, respect, and love. Never before have I experienced community as I have with SGC, certainly not in the only other religion I was a member of, Roman Catholicism. In addition to the insights and revelations from members during Sunday services, we learn about the sacraments and how to use them, practice meditation, and often have a musical offering. I regularly leave these services thoroughly inspired. With my focus on sacraments and church matters, I plan to organize an interfaith dialogue about psychedelics and religion for fall of 2022. In contrast with other events on this subject, such as the upcoming Charcuna conference in April, this one is strictly for community of faith leaders, both the laity and the clergy. And I might say, especially the clergy, would love to be able to reach and evangelize this very important part of the community. Well, now to Holly House. First, I'd like to give you a bit of background. Holly and I were together almost 20 years and so much in love despite huge differences in personality. She was, for instance, the quintessential introvert, modest to a fault, while I am a 98th percentile extrovert full of confidence. Holly was the executive assistant to university leaders. She finished her career serving 2 presidents of Johns Hopkins and 2 School of Public Health deans at the University of Washington. We met when I was organizing a conference on bioterrorism defense and lived on a houseboat where we had our first date. Holly died a year ago. Holly died a year ago, and I am dealing with my grief and loneliness in part by converting our home and outbuildings into a place to promote and eventually provide psychedelic healing and calling it Holly House. The setting for Holly House is remarkable. For starters, it is a certified wildlife habitat filled with birds and other animals such as raccoons and, damn it, rabbits. It is largely landscaped in the Japanese Zen naturalistic tradition with lots of bamboo, rock, including a 6-ton moss-covered boulder, and water. When the 4 planned water features are finished, you will, sorry for the phone, when the 4 planned
It might be a timer.
When the four planned water features are finished, you will be able to hear the sound of falling water everywhere on the property. Last week, I completed the largest of them, a waterfall with a 12-foot drop. The entire space is designed to foster serenity, contemplation, meditation, and connection to nature. I am reminded of Melville's words, meditation and water are wedded forever. Visitors often call the gardens sacred space, magical, or say they have never seen anything like them. Several separate gardens, such as a woodland shade, English cottage, a hidden garden, and a carnivorous plant bog, offer wide botanic variety. The largest of these gardens will be of psychoactive plants. I love flowers, and there are more than 100 species in bloom over the 4 seasons. All this and more on, believe it or not, 1/5 of an acre. A friend and former English major said it reminded him of a line from Christopher Marlowe's The Jew of Malta. Infinite riches in a small room. So Holly House has a threefold mission: educating the public on psychedelic healing. This is important. We need the public behind us. Training current and future therapists and others in the use of psychedelic medicines. I believe when these medicines become better known for their effectiveness, their cost, the rapidity with which they can solve some problems, and a new way of talking about these medicines, not just as treatments, but actually as cures. So by the time or when John and Jane Q. Public become aware of the effectiveness of these medicines, I am not sure there are going to be enough trained practitioners to serve them. So training current and future therapists and others in the use of psychedelic medicines is another mission for Holly House. And then preparing to relieve end-of-life patients with psilocybin, and preparing to relieve addiction with Ibogaine are the 2 further missions, or the 2 different ways where we hope to bring service to what Holly House does. So that's pretty much where we are with those 2 projects. And I'd like to say that in my whole life, I have been very cause-oriented, and ranging from better relations between the US and USSR, you see where that got me, the use of pharmacogenetics in diagnosing and treating patients. That's still a tough fight, and it sure isn't anything that insurance companies are paying for. The Equal Rights Amendment, well, that was dead a long time ago. So I have not a lot of climate change. I've not a lot of causes that I've gotten behind or tried to remedy that I could point to and say it worked. But you know what? I feel I am going to be going out on a winner with psychedelic healing. And the way that that can be demonstrated, I think, most dramatically and save trillions of dollars is by reforming how we deal with addiction. And this is something that I want to put time, energy, heart, and love into. And I hope you will join me and Awake Media and awake.net in helping to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was very beautiful. Right. I want to say condolences on your loss with Holly, but thank you for such a beautiful tribute to her spirit living on. And also best of luck with the rabbits. And thank you for the Melville quote. That hit the spot. That's from that first paragraph, actually, of Moby Dick. And it's a beautiful reminder, water and meditation. Thank you for sharing, and best of luck with Holly House. It's a beautiful project. And coming up next, we have Daniel Short. Daniel is a corporate and regulatory attorney based in Seattle, and he works extensively with entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry. He advises clients on matters related to hemp and marijuana, and frequently speaks at conferences and gets quoted in the media. Before joining Greenlight Law Group, he spent 5 years at Harris Bricken and wrote for the Cannabis Law blog there. He graduated from the University of Washington School of Law, where he worked extensively with the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board to fund and establish the Cannabis Law and Policy Project. And another musician. As an undergrad, he studied music at Gonzaga University, focusing on jazz guitar. So after college, he worked and volunteered at the Boys and Girls Club, and in his spare time, he plays guitar, takes boxing classes, and enjoys Seattle with his wife, Sierra, and their two dogs, Dexter and Oliver. So very pleased to welcome Daniel Schwartz to the stage.
Thank you, Lex, and thank you to all the other speakers, everyone in attendance. I'm honored to be a part of this presentation, and I know for myself, I've learned a lot about the background of many of the individuals involved with Awake. I am an Awake.net board member. I've been honored to work with Lakshmi and the whole team on setting up Awake.net. And again, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. What I'd like to focus on, and I want to keep this brief because I do view myself as a learner, and I'm still learning quite a bit about the entheogenic community, psychedelics in general. But as my bio indicates, I do have significant experience working with cannabis businesses. And one thing that Lex pointed out from my bio that I'd like to focus on is the work that I did with the University of Washington Cannabis Law and Policy Project. So I worked on an effort to try and track down all of the medical dispensaries that were operating in 2015 because the state had previously legalized adult use of recreational cannabis in 2012. And in 2015, legislation was passed to essentially unify this regulated recreational market and this medical marijuana market. And as part of my work with the University of Washington, we wanted to determine what the need was for medical marijuana with a recreational market starting to take place. Now, if those of you who were involved in Washington are paying attention to efforts to legalize Initiative 502, which along with Colorado made it so that Washington was one of the first states to legalize cannabis, if you'll remember, the opposition to I-502 didn't come from the alcohol industry. It did not come from the police guild. It came from the medical marijuana community. And the reason why the medical marijuana community opposed legalization was because there was a threat to recreational marijuana essentially taking over medical marijuana. And for better or for worse, that is exactly what happened. And I think when we talk about what lessons we can learn from the cannabis movement, I think it's important to note that sometimes in the effort to legalize this medical need and the medical community can get left behind. And that would be an absolute failure in my view with the push for legalization of any entheogen. And I don't think it needs to go that way. You know, if we look again at kind of the timeline here, cannabis, the views towards cannabis changed slowly over time. The first state to legalize medical cannabis was California back in 1996. And so from 1996 to 2012, when Washington and Colorado voted to legalize recreational cannabis, there was really only legalized cannabis at the state level in a medical way. And since then, the push has been to legalize adult use of recreational cannabis for all. So you're seeing more and more states either adopt medical legislation or full-on recreational legislation. But in my view, I don't think that I don't think that we're going to follow the same path necessarily when it comes to entheogens. One reason is the fact that, you know, if you're using kind of the first state to legalize California in 1996, and you're comparing it to Oregon, who recently, you know, or who is in the process of establishing this psilocybin market, as my colleague Andrew spoke about before, we're already seeing such a high level of support and so much money going to these companies that are involved with psychedelics or entheogens. And I think that that's really important to note, right, where this money is coming from, because there is going to be a need to kind of protect the smaller actors, to protect the communities that have used entheogens for decades and make sure that there's a space at the table for those communities and for leaders of those communities as we move forward. Because the commercial component of this cannot be ignored. It needs to be addressed, because already we're seeing pharmaceutical companies pouring money into these companies that are popping up and being traded nationally on the NASDAQ stock exchange. That's not going to go away. There's going to be a place here. And it's important that as this community begins to develop, and as we have opportunities like this to come together, to recognize what happened in cannabis, recognize the difference between what the entheogen community is pushing for versus what the cannabis community is pushing for, and take steps to get involved with state legislatures, to get involved with cities and counties as they move to decriminalize, to regulate, to legalize different substances, to ensure that we don't see the same thing that happened in cannabis, where there's all this opposition from big pharma, from pharmaceutical companies, which then turns into investment into trying to turn this plant into a profitable endeavor, a medicine that people keep taking. And I want to sort of part by, because we have so many great minds here, so many people focusing on this issue. And I want to highlight how Jamaica has taken an approach to legalizing cannabis, because as many of you know, in Jamaica, the Rastafarian culture uses cannabis or ganja as a sacrament. And while the system is experimental, and there are certainly things to be learned, I think it's important that we look towards the steps that Jamaica is taking to make sure that this sacramental use of ganja remains part of the conversation, that it's not just focused on medical cannabis or adult use cannabis. Cannabis is unique, and I think a lot of these entheogens are unique, but in my view, if we can try to learn from Jamaica as to how this is developing and to establish this medical, recreational, and sacramental market, that in my view is a good place to look and a good way to move forward. I know I'm running out of time. Again, I don't have nearly as much experience in the entheogen community as many of our other speakers, so I'm going to wrap it up now and say thank you again, everyone, for having us. I'm an attorney at Greenlight Law Group. We write about many legal issues on the Greenlight Law blog, and yeah, thank you all for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was a great insight into the lessons that we can be learning from cannabis as we move forward, especially with the reminder that sometimes the people who feel like they would be the friends are actually the enemies, and it's your neighbors that you have to watch out for more than anybody else oftentimes. So thank you very much for your sharing and for being on the board. And next, we actually have another Awake board member, John Rapp, and he is, and with John's story is a result of a family tragedy that got John deeply involved in the drive to decriminalize psychedelics in Seattle, which just succeeded last month, which has been wonderful news for everybody. And now in the drive to decriminalize them in all of Washington State, which is underway. John is an experienced trial lawyer, professional educator, and an ethics expert. He posts about cannabis and psychedelic law blog on his law firm, Harris Bricken, and they advise local and national psychedelic businesses. John also defends cases involving seizure of entheogens and will soon join the Chacruna Council for the Protection of Sacred Plants. He already belongs to the Sacred Garden community, a multi-sacrament church, and serves on its ethics council. John is most devoted to helping the least among us, the homeless, the hopeless, the addicts, the trauma survivors, and many others, to discover how entheogens can heal. And before law school, he was briefly a professional jazz trumpet player and a devotee of trumpeter Maynard Ferguson, who was one of the early proponents of psychedelics. I love all the lawyers who are musicians. So John hopes to help create the Meth Oxy 5, a jazz quintet of entheogenic practitioners. His talk today will be called What Decriminalization Means to You. Please welcome John Rapp. One second, you're muted there.
Am I unmuted now?
You're good now. Great, thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Lex. I'm delighted to be here today to support Awake's major missions to increase access to entheogenic substance abuse treatment and to create an online community for everyone in our growing movement, a noosphere, which is the word Teilhard refused to use to refer to a universal community of love. My topic today is what decriminalization means to you, a topic I'm sure many of you already know lots about. So I'll just offer some basic distinctions and data about recurring factors in our great work to reduce the risks associated with entheogenic use and supply. Then I'll offer brief thoughts for those of you who want to get more involved with this movement. Our success last month in Seattle and the long process that preceded it taught us a great deal. After 2+ years of setbacks, we persuaded the Seattle City Council to pass unanimously a resolution decriminalizing entheogenic use within the Seattle city limits. We are now also creating a statewide organization to promote decrim at the Washington state level. For those of you who haven't been deeply involved yet in the decrim movement, here's a very quick primer. In the US, laws are created at 4 primary levels of government: city, county, state, and federal. Any of these 4 levels of government can legalize entheogens, but only under their own laws and always subject to federal authority. So far, only the state of Oregon has legalized any entheogen, and only psilocybin. The new Oregon Psilocybin Advisory Board is guiding the state to establish a network of psilocybin service centers. Its licensing committee is chaired by my law partner, Dr. Mason Marks, whom I believe some of you already know. Oregon is in the vanguard now, but a few other states are active. Texas just passed a research bill supported by, of all people, former Governor Rick Perry. Psychedelic research bills in Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania are in process. A California bill is on hold, as are bills in Maine and Vermont. Under the Supremacy Clause of the US Constitution, federal law supersedes all these state laws. Decrim works because every government has power to choose their own law enforcement priorities. No government can do everything. So like the triage process in an emergency room, decriminalized jurisdictions simply choose to focus on crimes other than ones involving entheogens, violent crimes, for example. The Seattle City Council has now instructed city police to spend 0 resources here on entheogenic offenses. Seattle has joined a growing group that you've probably heard about: Oakland and others in California, Washington, DC, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids and others in Michigan, Cambridge and other cities in Massachusetts. We hope this list will grow quickly. As of now, no major activity around decriminalization or legalization exists at the federal level yet. Progress seems to me inevitable. 66 US psychedelic patents already exist. At least 37 more are under review. The well-financed companies that own these patents will not wait forever. Meanwhile, the federal government does some enforcement. Plant medicines were seized by the federal government over 200 times during 2020 and 2021, an increase over 2018 to 19. This increase may result from additional time for seizures that COVID has allowed. Nearly all of these seizures were made by Customs and Border Patrol. DEA is rarely involved. State and local law enforcement are rarely involved either. In most cases, no arrest was made. In many cases, an assertion of religious freedom ended the case. In short, federal prohibition abides. Only 3 fully legal venues currently exist for entheogenic use in the US: ketamine clinics, clinical trials, and visionary churches. We need more options. So local and state decrim must proceed while we await federal enlightenment. We must transfer momentum from Seattle and other decrim jurisdictions to new ones. So based upon my year working in Seattle's decrim process and observing the Oregon process, here are 5 personal observations, just my own, that might assist new groups organizing for decrim in other places. Number 1, focus on education. Many big cities have already de facto decriminalized entheogens. Thus, a decrim campaign often is as much about educating the public as it is about reducing legal risks. Public comments and testimony given at city, county, and state venues are time-consuming, but often indispensable. Personal testimonies from voters paired with research data seems to be the most effective option. Number 2, prioritize management. The Seattle Decrim Group experienced multiple changes of leadership and political consultants. Only a few people were involved over our full 30-month process. The changes were often due to differences over strategic priorities. Look for leaders who know how to keep your team well focused. 3, resolve differences early. The entheogenic movement is full of wonderful people who often disagree on key priorities. Just as we were about to succeed with the Seattle City Council, just a few weeks before our decriminal resolution ultimately passed, the psychedelic exceptionalism issue appeared that some of you are aware of. Some key players believe that psychedelics should be decriminalized only if all drugs are. It's a long story how this issue arose and was resolved. It's just an example of how early values clarification can aid decrim work. You may know of other thorny issues, for example, sourcing of mescaline. 4, choose your level carefully. Many liberal cities are in counties and states that are much less liberal than they are. Decriminalization in a blue city often means little or less in more conservative parts of a state. Statewide groups require far larger tents and also generally require dramatically more resources to succeed. 5, and last, read the news. As the psychedelic renaissance flowers, many underinformed people hear about decrim. We must know what they think they know in order to win them over. I've met many fine, smart people who think that all illegal drugs are the same. Currently, many ask about therapist abuse. We must be ready to answer. Our ethics may matter now as much as our legal views. So thanks for listening and being here today. Please join the decrim movement if you've not already. Little is more urgent in our hurting world. Let me know if I may assist you in any way. And thank you, Lakshmi, for your long work to create this exciting new awake community. Thank you.
Great. John, thank you so much for very actionable items on how we can pay attention and be better at this work. Very, very insightful. Great, thank you for the presentation. And now we move on to our cleanup hitter. 2 speakers left to go. We have Shonag Home. Shonag is a shamanic therapist, teacher, author, and poet. Her path began under the tutelage of Dr. Brug Joy, with an emphasis on both the spirit and the psyche. This opened her to a lifelong exploration of the inner workings of the mind and the rich territory of the spirit and the soul. She apprenticed with shamans who taught her not only their healing knowledge, but also impressed upon her the requirement for integrity and impeccability in working with others. For the past 10 years, she has apprenticed herself to the mushroom teachers who inform her through poetic prose. And she hosts weekly individual retreats at her home in rural Vermont and offers sessions, courses, and workshops throughout the year. She's also a beekeeper, a gardener, and a steward of a large 7-circuit stone labyrinth. You can learn more about her work at her website, www.shonaghome.org. I will put that in the links, and I will now give it to her, where she can probably pronounce her name correctly for me.
Thank you, Lex, so much. And yeah, it's Shona, but that's fine. I grew up. That's all right. As soon as I hit public school in 8th grade, every single teacher, every single year would mispronounce my name. So it's all good. Anyway, I am so very honored to be among these panelists. My goodness, so accomplished and so passionate and such integrity. And it doesn't surprise me that Lakshmi would gather this caliber of people for this effort. And I am very honored to be on the board of Awake.net. I think a lot of people are going to benefit greatly from the information on this website. I think the time is right for this right now. So I want to share with you my one-on-one retreat model. It doesn't include the use of psilocybin, but it would lend itself beautifully to that experience. In this model, the seeker has the privacy and the time to share and explore their inner workings in a peaceful and welcoming home setting. The attention is solely upon them. There are no other participants around to take them away from the work. They are held in a very nurturing environment where they can safely bare their soul. For the past 6 years, I have been hosting one-on-one retreats out of my home. And this began when one of my long-distance clients asked if there was any way she could fly out and stay with me for a few days and really focus in on what she was endeavoring to heal. So I considered it and I agreed. And our time together was life-changing, both for her and for me, because it birthed these retreats. Now, this is actually very traditional because, of course, back in the day, the shaman didn't have an office and they didn't have a retreat center. The shaman had a household. So this model isn't new and it isn't flashy. It's real, authentic, and personal. And in this digital age, where so much is happening online and everything is moving at a rapid pace, we are losing the art of intimacy in many ways. We as a people need authentic connection. This retreat model harkens back to the not so distant past, before the use of cellular devices, when regular folks spent quality time together, sharing intimately, listening attentively, asking the deeper questions, enjoying a home-cooked meal. Simple and very human ways of relating sets the stage for trust to build and inhibitions to ease. And over the course of a few days together, the big ahas can occur. With so many people seeking deeper meaning in their lives, this retreat model offers the seeker a soft place to land, where they are welcomed into a very different experience. So I will outline the elements of this retreat model for you. And as my wonderful clients already know, in the words of my late teacher, Dr. Brew Joy, the face you show is the face you get back. So we start with deep psychospiritual exploration and the recognition of patterns that keep one in a chronic loop of repetitive cycles. Bring in sharp insight that breaks the spell to form a whole new perspective moving forward. Conversations throughout the course of the day, covering a wide variety of subjects, will open the seeker to new approaches to life and new ideas. And I will quickly say that I have researched so many different things over the course of my life. I'm very much an autodidact and I love to learn. And I remember saying years ago, am I a jack of all trades, master of none? And now I realize after 6 years of these retreats that I was actually in training, right? Because there's always a commonality, there's always something to talk about with people. So the use of cards, such as tarot, is also very activating because cards can bring forth from the deep psyche material that may not have been brought forward yet. And this can be mind-blowing. And now you have their attention. Cards have long been used as messengers, and they can be incredibly astute and illuminating. As well, the use of the I Ching, which is an ancient oracular system from China, can serve as one's very own personal sage, whose wisdom is every bit as relevant today as it was 5,000 years ago. A basic understanding of the ancient science of astrology that measures the influence of the planetary bodies on the Earth and its inhabitants can assist the seeker to better understand the complexities of their persona and open them to the greater mystery that is at play within them. Food plays a role here. And we all know about the gut-brain connection at this point. To teach your client how to prepare nutrient-dense foods that will shower their body with nourishment and build a healthy gut microbiome will serve that person for the rest of their life. Time spent in nature is an integral part of this retreat model. Long walks, taking in the beauty of nature, enjoying conversation will serve to ground and invigorate both body and mind. Nature, as I think we all know, is the greatest teacher. And a simple walk in her beauty will shift negative thinking and improve one's outlook. The art of weaving is taught. This is where the seeker learns to align the power of the imagination with the spiritual forces to co-creatively craft their reality. Also, a very reasonable game plan is put together, along with tools that the seeker can use moving forward. And of course, follow-up sessions will provide support and encouragement. Finally, I think it helps to work with an outliner, someone who sees beyond the surface story, both individually and collectively. In this way, they can assist the seeker to see their inner workings and the world around them with new eyes. A practitioner who thinks outside of the box can stimulate new ideas and new perspectives that can further the seeker in their awakening process. Awakening requires an open mind. And what better way to open your mind than to break routine, take yourself into an intimate experience with a seasoned practitioner under their care, and who has a very different point of view and can take you into a far broader understanding of the living mystery. And that living mystery is you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. That was very, very wonderful. I especially appreciate the quote, the face you show is the face you get back. That's actually gonna go up right here, right now. And I really liked what you said about all the different tools that you used, and completing the quote. The Jack of all trades quote is one of the great misquoted quotes of all time. There's a completion to it. A Jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. If you look up great quotes that are not completed, that always comes up, and it can be important, especially in these kind of fields that are breaking so many different territories, be studying all these different directions. So thank you for that inspiration on all of these tools that could be useful for us, and for a lovely presentation. Great. And now I am very pleased to present our last speaker will be Jack Cross. And Jack Cross writes in an altered state of consciousness about the geometric structures of the English-Latin alphabet at the intersection of shamanism and Christian mysticism. Today, Jack will talk about why the word journey begins with a J. And just unmute yourself there and we're good to go. Great.
Oh, you guys are great. It's been very interesting. Greenlight Law Group, thanks so much for all the work you've done, especially Daniel. Couldn't have done it without you. I think I heard about 3 lawsuits against the first 3 letters of death today. So I think I'm in the right group. I thought I'd talk a little bit about why journey begins with a J. We're on the beginning of our journey. So I think that'd be a good thing for people to know. I don't think any journalist in America probably knows why journalism begins with a J. And I don't think probably any judge in America knows why judge or judgment begins with a J. So the attorneys among us might find this interesting. This is esoteric. It's a secret that I have to tell you. I think the best thing to do is visualize a cone, like consciousness, and you're looking inside the cone. You've just emerged inside of it, and there's a light, and you're disoriented, so you squint to focus. And you might notice that when you squint at light, light will appear to convert into the configuration of a cross. And this is where the idea of ordinates and order come from. And what's happening is you're sectioning a vision in 4 parts to organize it. And you might add yourself in this cross as a third pole. The letter J is a third ordinate. And the French put on what's called the minuscule in the Middle Ages to differentiate it from an I tilted to the right. A J basically is an I tilted to the right. And the minuscule is a symbol of return. It's mimicking the idea of a crook. Back to law, crooks. And in ancient Egypt, the crook was considered the supreme symbol of religious authority. And it still is. We smoke a J. Joint begins with a J and ends with a T, an intersection of a vertical and horizontal coordinate. We jaywalk. We cross the street without authority. We go to courts. A court is a type of quadration, ends with a T, an intersection of a vertical and horizontal coordinate. And what do we seek? Justice starts with a J, from a judge, jury, who has jurisdiction to adjudicate. Why? Because the letter J, the 10th letter, setting and intention, is the middle way. Medicine, meditation means middle, and middle has no meaning without a set of coordinates. Mean, the base of meaning in mathematics, means middle. A shaman is an in, T's across, mediary. You basically are reconciling your consciousness by finding the middle way between opposites, vertical and horizontal, Y and X, genetics, Y and X, male and female. So it's kind of an androgynous third way. And in that position, you are in the position of reconciling. I call it reconciling your consciousness. You're seeing the conflicts of your life, your internal process, your internal life, your mistakes. This is where the idea of judgment comes in. You are inside that third ordinate. It's the wizard's wand. And you are examining the relationship of good and evil. It's a cone, like a pine tree is a conifer. This is why they have candy canes, the letter J, associated with Christmas trees. The red and white striped candy cane, red, the color of the feminine of blood, and white, the color of the sacred masculine, purity. We surrender with a white flag. Many, 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 many things like this inside of a journey where you start to realize, or what I call realize, the pineal, the pine cone, the AL, the L, the A, the compass, the square. Instruments of measurement belonging to a carpenter. You are essentially crucifying yourself on a cross made of light inside of your pineal gland, and realizing that letters have shapes, and shapes are geometric, and geometry is symbolic mathematics. So what's happening is that one side of your brain is talking now to the other side of your brain. This is why join begins with a J. You're joining them together with a J on a journey. That's my story. Take it away, Lex, which means law. Lex.
Great, thank you. Sorry, who didn't go over time. Amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, Lex means law. Almost nobody knows that. I've had 3 people in my life know that. Thank you for that journey of the J. That was fascinating, especially as someone who's worked as a journalist. I didn't have any of that put together. So yeah, thank you very much, Jack. And so that's why Jack is our last speaker. He helped us finish the journey. And so I think we will let Lakshmi have a few closing words. On my end, I will just say, I'm Lex Pelger, and if you want to see more about the endocannabinoid system Moby Dick books, they're at lexpelger.com. I also have a new business called White Whale Creations. But also, I just want to say thank you to all of our speakers. It was really an amazing array of guests in all of these different directions. And it was an honor to hear from all of you. And thank you to all of our attendees watching the chats, and all the information, love, and heart you've been bringing has just helped buoy the entire thing up. So thank you very much. And I will hand it over to Lakshmi to close this out.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this event and giving us your attention and helping us to have such a nice kickoff. I want to leave you with 4 calls to action. One is, we're trying to raise $1 million in 10K treatments so that you can take 100 people through an Ibogaine trip. And we want to do this in 2022. So if you can donate, we have a really great platform, and you can do recurring donations or a one-time donation. You can decide who you want to give the donation to, what cause. So you can choose aims, you can choose feet. Secondly, you can join up as a free member, or you can join up as a paid member, as a media maker or a mentor and master, and you can put up a website with the help of Awake Media Services. You can put up a crowdfunding campaign of your own. You can create a group. You can create an integration circle. You can put on an event just like this if you want, with our help. So please join. And thirdly, in November 2022, we'd like to put on a workshop called Awe, Awakening with Entheogens. And we're looking for amazing mentors and masters, teachers from all over to join us. And we want to create a week-long thing that has offline, real-time, offline, and online components to it, so that we can have little communities all around who are helping people to have an initiatory journey in a week. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lakshmi. This was pretty wonderful, and we'll be in touch soon.
Okay.
Love you.
Okay.
Love you.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah. All right. Now everybody can be seen, so we can all wave it out to our guests. Everybody heads out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone. Andrew, Eric, Liana. John, Paul, thank
Yeah.
you.
If anyone has a minute, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something I forgot to mention. It's kind of exciting. Stanford University, through an organization called Vet Solutions, there were a couple of vets, a famous vet called the Lone Survivor, Marcus Luttrell, who took a flood dose of Ibogaine to cure traumatic brain injury and PTSD. These vets come back and tell me I killed women and children in the name of a good cause, and there's nothing for me to do except re-enlist or blow my brains out. Ibogaine seems to be curing these vets with traumatic brain injury. So Stanford wanted to do a study with pre and post functional MRIs, seeing what are the brain changes taking place after Ibogaine. But Stanford was so worried about the bad reputation surrounding Ibogaine that the study could not take place. And with the help of Marcus and Amber Capone and Stanford, this study is starting at the beginning of December. So Stanford wants to be 8 degrees separated from the Ibogaine. They wouldn't accept any of the current Ibogaine clinics. So we've kind of set up a clinic in Mexico. I'm not there doing the treatments, but I'm the gatekeeper for these treatments. And this is the first study coming out of a major university looking at Ibogaine for other treatments aside from addiction, alcoholism. So Ibogaine as a treatment for traumatic brain injury is absolutely, amazing to me. I'm so honored to be part of this study in any way possible. And, Stanford is worried about being protected. So, I got the patients don't make it to Stanford until they get through me. I'm the screening tool for which patients get accepted, but it's just more exciting news because if there is something to be seen there on these MRIs and Stanford publishes it, the world will pay attention.
Yeah. I also want to add to that absolutely untapped is the ability to Ibogaine to alter symptoms of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's.
I got to tell you something, Eric, I'm not so sure of that, okay? This idea, I met the original Parkinson's patient in person years ago at a conference. I believe no psychedelic may cause as much neuroplasticity as Ibogaine does due to glial-derived neuropeptic factor. I'm not really, it may be, I just don't know. We have to do a lot more research.
That's where we need studies, but
yeah,
he
this is my point, but
an amazing, we need studies.
The information coming about, came from not a very reputable source. And it's we're looking at a study of like 2 or 3 people. And as a scientist, you have to look what else happened in their treatment that could have accounted for, these improvements. I have given, small doses of Ibogaine to some patients with Parkinson's, and I did not see them improve.
Yeah.
So, the ball, again, that's something possible down the line. I hope it's true, but, and a lot of things are being diagnosed as Parkinson's that are not Parkinson's. A lot of things look like Parkinson's. Everybody calls all dementia Alzheimer's, and it's not. There are many, many different neurodegenerative diseases and movement disorders. But, again, research is needed and big dollars are needed. And even at this last conference, Dr. Mayer said, why are you not giving this information away? And their answer was, because we've invested all this money. And so again, it comes down to return on investment. And this is just absurd, Well,
I hope you have a good night. And what an event this has been. Thank you again, Lakshmi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Lakshmi, kudos to you, because without you, none of this would happen. I know this was a tremendous amount of work for you. I think I've been with you since the beginning, and just well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste. Yeah. Travel well, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Further.
Bye.
As the bus said, further.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lex, for everything you've done.
Sure, sure. Yep, time for bed.
Yep.
All right.
Isn't it?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
I don't see you. I don't know why. In this meeting.